Hi everyone, welcome to the Fleet Security Awareness Training. This is the May 2022 version of it. This is a training that every new fleetee needs to go through when hired and everyone else once a year. The training focuses on the tools that we use and it also applies to securing your own personal devices and accounts. First of all, when you get onboarded, you need to enroll your fleet laptop to Mobile Device Management or MDM. That's only for fleet-owned Macs. If you have your own personal computer, you're free to use it for a lot of different things at Fleet, but you should not enroll it to MDM because that's going to push configurations to it, which you probably want to keep under your own control. The reason why we want our laptops to be enrolled to MDM is so they get configured securely with our Fleet security baseline, which you can find in our handbook. It automatically pushes OS query using Fleet's Orbit installer, configuring it so that it reports to our dog food instance. And it also provides a catalog of apps that you can install easily. So you'll see a little cloud icon on the top of your Mac and you can open a Managed Software Center and you'll see a lot of different applications. If you install them from there, you'll be sure to have the latest version and it'll also keep them up to date and free of vulnerabilities. Then a really important thing about cybersecurity is, of course, authentication and passwords and two-factor authentication and all of these different things. First of all, why that's important is simply because weak passwords are one of the easiest ways for people to break into accounts. And passwords that are reused will leak. So for example, if you have a password on website 1, which gets breached, the password might get leaked. And if you're using that same password on 5 other websites, these accounts will eventually get compromised. Attackers find value in many different things. You might have a LinkedIn account with a lot of followers. Someone could use that to post spam or even to try and social engineer your connections. And phishing will always work. So even if you have the most secure password that's never been reused anywhere else, if you fall victim to phishing, which is easy to do because great phishing is really hard to tell from legitimate emails, then your password will fall into the wrong hands and your accounts will be compromised. We often see on the web a lot of advice about what a secure password is, and it can be confusing. Do I need special characters? How long should it be? Should I change it every 90 days or whatever? Our advice when it comes to passwords is pretty straightforward. The first thing is, if you can use single sign-on from your Google Workspace account, do that. That way you don't even have to worry about another account. It's going to be that same account, no other passwords to store. Then you want to be sure you enable two-factor authentication anywhere you can. And then your password should be unique and long. When enabling two-factor authentication, there's often many different options that are provided. From the most secure to the least secure, those are hardware security keys. Here at Fleet, we use YubiKeys. Push notification-based two-factor authentication. That's when you log in on your Mac or PC and you get a notification on your phone saying, hey, are you currently trying to log in from this city? You say yes, and then you're logged in. Then we have the time-based one-time passwords, or TOTP. Those are the Google Authenticator style 6-digit codes that change every minute or so. And then there's everything that relates to SMS or voice phone calls. If you want more details on that, we have a lunch and learn on two-factor authentication methods. But just keep in mind that whenever you can use the security keys, use those. And then if you can't, you can use the other methods, but avoid SMS and voice unless it's the only option available. It's still better than nothing. I previously mentioned password managers as the way to store a lot of passwords because they all have to be unique. So if you go to our Managed Software Center, you'll see that we have 1Password. We have a corporate 1Password license that also lets you use a personal vault for your own password. So we highly recommend that you use that for your personal passwords if you don't already have a password manager. And then for Fleet accounts, well, for anything that does not support single sign-on, please generate a password using 1Password and store it in there. And then try to avoid sharing passwords. It's usually a much better idea for everyone to have accounts to their own names, but in certain circumstances, it's impossible to do so. So when that happens, use 1Password to share it. Now let's talk about phishing. Good phishing looks real. So if you think you cannot fall victim to phishing, it's only because you've not seen phishing that was perfectly tailored to you. Please take 5 minutes and do the phishing quiz test that's on the slide at phishingquiz.withgoogle.com. That's a phishing quiz that is built on the Gmail UI, so it looks exactly like what we use here. And by the way, you should use the Gmail apps and the Gmail web app as much as possible. When you use third-party email clients, you won't see warnings like the one on this slide telling you to be careful with specific messages. So that's why we highly prefer that people use the real Gmail applications. Now, you need to assume phishing can be so well targeted that you can't spot it. You might receive an email that looks totally legit from someone in the company. If it feels weird, just ask around. Ask around on Slack. Ask around on Zoom. You should also be careful of alternate phishing methods. So traditional phishing will be in an email with a link, but more and more attackers are using things like calendar invites, or inviting you to edit documents on Google Docs, or inviting you on social networks like LinkedIn. What you should do if you do receive phishing in your inbox is report it. So at the top right of the message, there's a menu you can pop up and it's got a report phishing button. If you report it like that, the security team will receive a report if the volume of reports is unusually high. But if you feel like the phishing message was better or more targeted than what you're used to seeing, please report it in the security channel so everyone else can be aware. So for example, if you see a phishing message that pretends to be one of our vendors sending a fake invoice and you think that might be targeted, do report it with the Gmail tool, but also mention it in the security channel. A social engineering attack type that is frequently successful at stealing money away from companies is business email compromise, or BEC. These types of attacks simply leverage our willingness to help people, like most social engineering attacks. These attacks will typically try to make you believe they're coming from the CEO or anyone else in a position of authority in a company. They'll use urgency to make you do something that results in their financial gain. So that could be anything from telling you, hey, I'm the CEO, I'm with customers right now, can you go buy a bunch of iTunes gift cards for them? Or it can be as bad as pretending they're the CEO, asking you to do a wire transfer for $500,000 for some acquisition we just made. And the thing is, these attackers often have access to a lot of information about our company and our partners, so it can look really legitimate. Fleet is a remote company. We all work from our own house or anywhere else. People often ask, what should I do when I'm traveling? Well, when you're traveling to most places, it doesn't make much of a difference. We assume that all networks are dangerous. We don't control your home network. We don't know what else could be there. And it's the same thing if you're working from Starbucks. So we make sure that your laptop is configured in a way that should resist being used on a public wireless network. If you're using a Fleet enrolled Mac, the firewall is enabled. Our DNS queries are encrypted, so it makes it a little harder for people to see what websites you're visiting. And the protocols we use are all encrypted, making it impossible for someone to steal your credentials away. That being said, keep in mind that when you're using a public network, someone could see at a high level what websites you're visiting and so on. But from a security point of view for your Fleet accounts, there's no problem using GitHub, Slack, all the Google tools when you're on such a network. As long as you don't proceed if you see a SSL or TLS certificate warning. This could be an indication that someone is trying to steal your encrypted credentials. Installing applications is one of the ways malware gets onto computers. We have a few different ways to install applications to make that less risky. The first one is to install applications from the Managed Software Center. So be sure you look in there before you install something because it might already be available. If it's a tool like Visual Studio Code, Zoom, Slack, or anything like that, just get it in there. You'll know it's the legit version and it'll be kept up to date automatically for you. Then we recommend using package managers like Brew or APT to keep things up to date, but also because they're a repository which, while it is not perfect, is used by a lot of people. And when malware does slip through those systems, it's usually detected and remediated. And then whenever you need to install something that's not available in one of those, make sure you always download things from official websites or the official repositories of open source projects. You could also use the Mac App Store if you're looking for apps, but never use these download websites that repackage software because they typically include at least adware with the software they're distributing. Since we use Google Workspace, you might be wondering how to add apps that integrate to Google Workspace. We allow apps that only access your name and email address similar to a login form. We do not automatically allow apps that have access or require access to Gmail or Google Drive because these free apps could simply read all of the data in your Google account and exfiltrate it to somewhere else. That being said, our process is pretty straightforward for adding new apps if a business process requires it. So just let us know in the G Security channel. you can paste the error message you get when trying to add it, and then we'll know exactly what application you're talking about, and then we'll see if we can allow it, in which case then you'll just need to add it a second time and it'll work fine. When it comes to browser extensions, in Chrome, Firefox, or Safari, the same type of caution applies as when installing software. If you're using Chrome, which is deployed by default on all Fleet managed computers, you'll see we've already deployed an ad blocker to your Chrome, as well as the 1Password extension. We highly recommend that you use an ad blocker in every browser that you use, and that you limit extension usage to well-trusted ones. Whenever you install an extension that's brand new, that's not really well known, that could be risky. Disable the extensions you do not use frequently. So for example, if you use the Grammarly extension from time to time, that might not be a malicious extension, but it does have access to a lot of stuff in your browser. So you can turn it off when you don't need it. And when you're editing a document where you need Grammarly, you can enable it again. That way, if there's ever a vulnerability in it, we're protected 99% of the time. Keeping stuff up to date is critical when it comes to securing your own laptop. The operating system and your browsers are the most critical things to keep up to date. Your OS and Chrome, if you're using a Fleet provided Mac, will be kept up to date automatically, though you will be provided some delay before Chrome gets restarted or your Mac gets restarted for updates. It is important to install them as fast as you can. So for example, if you see a Chrome update asking for Chrome to be restarted, feel free to hit the restart button right away. It will reopen your tabs and then that'll be done and you won't be exposed to whatever most recent vulnerabilities have been fixed in Chrome. We also use Fleet data to send you notifications via email and on Slack when vulnerable software is detected on your computer. And if you use a package manager like Brew, be sure you update it frequently because there's a lot of software that you'll have installed with Brew that needs to be updated with these commands. And when it comes to your personal devices, including mobile devices, make sure you enable automatic updates. If your iPhone or Android device was too far out in terms of operating system versions, you could lose access to Fleet applications and systems. Since Fleet is a very open company, most of what we do is public. We work on GitHub on the Fleet repository. We have our issues there, we have our code there, and from time to time, we're going to make a mistake and something that was meant to be confidential is going to get posted to GitHub. If it's posted as an issue, there's a way to delete it. But if it's in a comment, even after you edit it, the previous version will remain available. So make sure you pick it from the selector right here and then go to Options and delete the revision. But if it was posted as a pull request or a commit, deleting it is very difficult. So if it was a secret, for example, like a key to something, consider it permanently leaked and it has to be rotated. If it was something different, like for example, email addresses of employees, which it's not the worst thing in the world that they were made public, but it will generate some spam and you really want them to be deleted from the history, please post about it in the security channel so we can work with GitHub to completely delete that from GitHub. Now, what to do if you lose something? If you lose your laptop, don't panic. The laptop is encrypted. No one's going to go through your data in there. But post about it in the security channel as soon as possible. And then we'll inform the business operations team so they can get you a new laptop as soon as possible. The security team will make sure that your old laptop is completely disabled and that if it was allowed to log into any of our tools, that access will be revoked, even though since the laptop is encrypted, that should not be much of a problem. If your laptop was stolen while it was unlocked and in use, please change your Fleet Google Workspace account, which will log out any pre-existing devices from it. Now, what if you lose your YubiKeys? They're pretty small, right? So that can happen. Don't panic, post about it in the security channel so they can be disabled. And then new ones will need to be ordered. But in the meantime, you can use your phone as a hardware security key so that you can keep working without your YubiKeys. And then if you find your keys after we've disabled them, you can re-enable them. They're still going to work as they did when they were brand new. And finally, something pretty important is if you see something that looks suspicious, which doesn't necessarily mean super malicious, it could just be a message from someone that looks off. It's not written the same way they usually write. It could be someone asking you to do something that you think might be dangerous, even though you're not quite sure. Well, make sure you ask about it in the security channel. We can't know everything. No one can spot everything that is an attack. No one can resist every type of social engineering attack. But together, we can detect most of them. And by informing everyone else that that's going on, then we can be protected as a group and as a team. Now that you've completed the training, please be sure you go through the phishing quiz test that was previously mentioned, and then take a screenshot of this completion certificate and upload it on our compliance tool.